Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. Today, we're talking about sex. Yes, because Michelle and I were talking about having a lot of content for the season of the podcast, talking about ways that women settle. And we're going through all the ways that we settle and progress with our body and our time and all of these things. And then the biggest way we settle, it hit me, it's with sex. And I'm reminded of old stories. I had a colleague once who told me that she was taking a job in another city, and this guy she'd been seeing for a whole year, he wanted to really give it to her good for the last time because she was moving along on her way, and really did it. And then she had a great orgasm, and he's like, well, what was that? And she goes, an orgasm. And then she looked at him, and because he had no idea what had happened. And he goes, that was an orgasm? And she goes, yeah, if I had known you could do it like that, I would have said something sooner. And then I have another friend who for decades was with a husband that she just could not stand how he kissed. And she started having affairs. And I'm like, why are you doing this? And she goes, I can't stand how he kisses. And I'm like, well, maybe you should tell him. She goes, well, I don't want to hurt his feelings. And I said, don't you think that having affairs would hurt his feelings more? So to answer questions like this, we've got Monda McGregor with us, who is a licensed mental health therapist, as well as a clinical sex therapist. So Mona, welcome. Welcome, welcome. We are so excited. We've been really excited about this one in a little bit.
That's great. There's nothing I love to talk about more than sex. So I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I wasn't going to start with this, but how did you get into this?
Wow. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that question. Well, I've always been very comfortable with the topic. Basically, that's one part. And I love my work as a therapist. And I had always been very curious about Dr. Ruth and things like that. I didn't even know it existed. I didn't know you could be a sex therapist. And I had a professor in university. And then as I was doing my supervision for my mental health counseling, I had the opportunity to enter a program in clinical sexology. And I love the field. It has really enhanced my work with individuals and couples, because I really think it's kind of hard to work with couples without having that piece. And so it's just basically with an opportunity to be able to offer more to the clients that I'm seeing.
I'll just say, well, it's certainly where it shows up when things aren't working. That's the first thing to be affected in a relationship.
Are most of your clients men, women, or couples?
It really varies. I have to look. I think back in the week that I've had, I see a lot of individuals for clinical sex therapy. I have a few couples right now, and some people I'm seeing individually. It's not the only type of therapy that I do, but it's a huge part. In the state of Florida, you have to be a certified clinical sex therapist to be a sex therapist, and it's an additional program and additional supervision. So you can't just sort of call yourself that. And there aren't very many of us. I mean, which works well for me, but it keeps me really busy.
So what is it about sex that makes it so hard to communicate what we need, so we end up having problems that, over time build up, like that friend with the husband with the sloppy kisses?
Well, we live in this really sexualized world. I mean, everywhere you look, pick up a magazine, the movies that we watch, we live in this very sexualized world, and yet it's still so stigmatized and taboo to talk about it. We have internationally probably one of the worst programs for sex ed in the world. We do a terrible job of educating our youth. And if you think back, I don't know what your family was like, but we didn't joke about it. We didn't talk about it. I remember being in my 20s and I found a book in my mom's closet, like how to talk about where babies come from. Just very uncomfortable. And my poor mother, she's so conservative. Her biggest fear when I became a sex therapist was that I would like have a radio show or something. And here I am, we're talking about sex live and on a podcast. So I grew up where it was just really taboo, and which is unfortunate. And so we grow up with that. And then depending on our programming, where we go to church, the messages we receive from teachers and adults and, our pastors and things like that, it really forms so much of how we look at this topic, this very important topic. And I have to say that actually, I just really was reminded of one of the other reasons why the big reason I became a sex therapist. I was married young. I was married at about the age of 24, and I knew nothing about it. And we had some major struggles. We couldn't talk about it at all. And if you can't talk about it, you're certainly not going to be able to help each other out. And I just remember at that time needing someone just like me. And so one of the reasons I became a sex therapist really was because that was exactly the person I needed in my early 20s to feel safe to talk about it, to be able to ask questions, to get practical advice, and to be offered some other resources that might have helped us at that time. So that's kind of a regret that I had. And so I'm hoping that with the work that I do, it creates a space for younger people and people of all ages to be able to ask questions and talk openly in a safe place where it's non-judgmental.
My ex-husband, Jeff, I shouldn't say his name, Jeff, lost his virginity on prom night. I've told this story a million times. He wouldn't care. And she was also a virgin. And I said, boy, I bet that was good. And he goes, oh, it was. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. And I said, yeah, I bet it was really good for her. And he said, it was. And I said, how do you know? And he goes, well, I heard her. She had an orgasm. I said, she faked that orgasm. And he goes, no, she didn't. And I'm like, yes, she did. And he goes, why would she do that? I said, because she wanted you to stop, right? But that is where the habit starts.
You're taught that.
Yeah.
Because the good girls don't want to hurt you don't want to hurt your partner's feelings. And that's their sense of self. And that's their like manhood on the line. So you've got to give that to them.
And that's what we see in movies. It's got to sound like this and look like this, or you're not really having sex, or what you're seeing in terms of pornography. I think that does a lot to our programming as well.
But it does make it better. So
to fake an orgasm or to have an orgasm?
To have it, right? That's the goal, right? So what do we need to do so that we can hit the mark?
Honestly, I think the orgasm. So I think people think that we talk about orgasms a lot as sex therapists. We don't talk about the orgasm as much as we talk about other things. The orgasm is a bit like dessert. It's an added bonus. It's delicious, but you don't need to have it to feel comfortable or satiated, or even to enjoy something. But I know everybody's eye is on that experience. And I am not downplaying the orgasm. Very, very healthy for you. Very fun. Every orgasm is different. They're not all like the 4th of July. And, but I think that we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we think that we haven't had a complete experience unless we've had the orgasm, unless our partners had the orgasm. We can get very caught up in worrying about what they're experiencing. And then we get out of our own head and our own bodies at the same time. So
so that resonates with me. I'm not thinking about that as this is good sex if there is an orgasm. It's about what all was happening leading up. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And typically it doesn't if it's a good experience, it doesn't change that it's a really good experience.
Sure. Sometimes you want to road. Sometimes when you're going on a trip, sometimes you have more fun in the car with your girlfriend laughing than when you get to your destination. So that's life, isn't it? It's not so much just arriving, but all these great things that you experience. And every person is different. For many people, the orgasm is great, but it's not their favorite part. Many times it's the emotional connection. Sometimes it's foreplay. Sometimes it's just everything in between, how you're feeling in your own body. So everyone's different. I think we have to be very careful about assuming that there is a normal or a right way about anything within this domain.
So what are some of the things that we should be doing to have better experiences all around? And to get out of our heads, I think that's always the hardest part.
Well, your brain is the biggest sex organ in your body. And that's where it begins. It begins in your brain, thinking about it, desire, anticipation, all of these things. That's why it seems simpler and easier and even more fun at the beginning, because you don't really know what's going to happen next when you meet someone new. There's a lot of passion, there's spontaneity, mystery. There's a lot of things that go on in our head. Is it going to happen tonight? How is this going to feel? So there's a lot of things that go on in the brain, and that's where desire begins. And normally it starts with desire, goes to arousal, where we have the physiological changes that go on in our body, the blood flow and the lubrication, orgasm, and then plateau. So what are the things that get in the way? So many things get in the way, but I think the biggest thing that gets in the way is our own self. You know, we as women, we are so used to taking care of everybody else, making sure everybody else is happy and cared for and nurtured, and we tend to put our focus away from ourselves and onto maybe our partner more than even ourselves, and we don't necessarily even know our own bodies very well. You know, many people have been raised where they don't even have the accurate words for anatomy. And so if you're not using the right word, I mean, I think everybody thinks it's a vagina. Everything down there is a vagina, which is, so if we don't have the accurate language to talk about it, and we don't feel safe talking about it or learning more about it, those kinds of things can get in the way. And I think a lot of us don't know our own sexual selves. And I think one of the most important ways to learn about yourself as a sexual creature is with yourself. Being able to be comfortable in your own skin, being able to look in the mirror and see things that you love, see things that are sexy, see things that make you feel pretty, to touch your own body, to experience that, and then self-pleasuring with masturbation, to just even getting to know your own body before you're with a partner.
But Mona, if you're a good girl, you don't do that kind of thing, and you sure don't admit to it.
That's right. You don't talk about it, do you? Yeah. But we're starting to get better.
Maybe not in Texas. We talk about it in Florida.
But that's so important what you just said. I know you're joking, but where we are raised, the culture we're raised in, the religion, the church, all of these things, we are between the age of 0 and 8. Everything you hear lands in the subconscious mind. Okay? Sex is bad. Save it till you're married. What is that message? Okay, I'm going to save this bad thing for, and what happens if you masturbate? What happens if you do that too much? You go blind, or this happens, or, you're going to get pregnant with the very first, all these things that get handed down to just keep you from avoiding this very natural feel-good thing. And so there are the messages we hear, what we read, all kinds of things come into play with that. But I think the biggest thing is we don't prioritize our own self-care. We're taking care of everybody else. If we really prioritize our own self-care and what that means for each person individually, I think that we would do a better job of asking for what we need, being a little more selfish in terms of what we need, to create the perfect context, create the perfect space for us to be interested or in the mood or anticipating it, and experiencing great things with our partners.
Well, I think what you were talking about earlier about the journey too, I think it just goes into, it's a great reminder, right, of the importance of play, like flirting, that just fun things like that. So talk about a little bit about the role of play, and I'll say, what's the word I'm looking for? Like foreplay, right? Foreplay, whether it's sexual or not, the importance of that in terms of building that connection and anticipation.
Well, foreplay, I think, should be, better term would be core play, right? And again, if you think back to meeting somebody interesting and being courted by some. First of all, I love to be courted. I'm a firm believer we should have date nights for the rest of our life. But there's, again, there's the mystery, people really stepping up, doing the best job that they can, seeking to get to know you better and understand what you like, and taking you special places and having special moments, and really kind of slowly unwrapping you like a gift, from an emotional sense to an intellectual to a physical sense. And so the core play, and that's, women need all of their senses fired up to be into it. Men tend to, and I don't like to be too rigid with gender this and gender that, but we tend to have all of our senses ignited, whereas men are a little more visual. And so when we're enjoying something, it's visually stimulating, it smells good, it tastes good, it feels good, you have all the time in the world, it can really create a great space for the core play or the foreplay, which is what many people are talking about.
For the men that you see in your practice, is that too much work for them? How did they respond to the idea of putting that much effort into their partner?
It just runs a gamut. Honestly, I have men, I thinking about a couple that I had last night that are just this delightful young couple. And he is always pursuing her, where she's like, oh my God, enough. Okay, enough. And he is always trying to be creative and innovative with these things. So I don't know if we can make it too gender specific. I think that men might look at it as a lot of work, but some men really enjoy that. It's like a project, creating something different, creating surprise. I have a lot of very creative males that I see in my practice that are just always, should I try this? Should I do this? I had this idea. I'll get interesting text messages sometimes out of the blue. Is this random? Is this weird? What's she going to think about that? And I love when men are creative, and I think maybe they have more of a romantic blueprint in their head. Possibly that comes from what they observed when they were children, how they saw their fathers, take care of their mothers, how they showed up in that regard, or how fathers even raised their daughters to have those expectations to be made to feel special and important. So many times I think men just don't know what to do. They think it has to be so over the top to be interesting when it really doesn't.
And what's the most romantic thing that's ever happened to you? Do you know? Think of anything?
The most
for fun. Yeah, fun.
The most romantic thing ever was, it was with Jeff and our first date, and we were out there walking behind my apartment. I lived right in this garage apartment on the Atlantic Ocean. It was a full moon, and we just walked out into the water with our clothes on. It was just magical. But we didn't have sex then.
Mm-hmm. But that's the foreplay.
Yeah.
All of it starts there. I think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, but then, you start having sex, and it was like all the time. And I remember I was just, we were young. It was just so great. And my friend was married for like 15 years. And she goes, you'll get over that. And I'm like, no, we won't. Yeah. She goes, it's kind of like if you're eating ice cream every day, man, ice cream's really good the first couple of times, but after a while, you're really sick of ice cream. So what happens?
Well, I think you bring up a very interesting point. The brain loves novelty. Okay. And what is so exciting at the beginning, again, and what passion is the intrigue. You're not really sure what's coming next. It's surprise. So when you meet someone new, you don't have this, your bodies aren't in this groove together, so it's a little bit awkward. Everybody's showing up, trying to do the best job they can. And you're learning about this person, and you're finding out about their family, and you're finding out about what they're passionate about, what you have in common. And especially if you do something, research has shown if you go on a first date that creates the opportunity for adrenaline, it creates an incredible bond and an incredible attraction because you're getting all those chemicals going at the same time. So that's why I love active dates. I love experiential dates when it's not just, I think not the worst, but I think a first date that's going to a movie, I don't know, it might work for some people. It wouldn't fly for me because there's no opportunity to talk or to do something. You're just observing.
Unless that's what they want. They don't.
Right.
So, I don't know. Going back to your novelty thing. So one of my friends, she and her husband, now they've been married for a very, very long time in a very healthy marriage. And it was one of the interesting things. I'm not saying her name because she'll probably kill me for telling this, but they would go on dates, but she would always say, well, we have sex twice a week and it was a plan, like it was scheduled. And I'm like, that just sounds awful. But she goes, no. One of the things they would do is they would find new creative ways to have sex. So at one point in their lives, they started in the alphabet, A, B, C, and would find a street in town that had an open house and would go down the alphabet and they would go have sex in the first the open house. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But she's like, just those are the things where you can keep it unexpected and interesting, even when you've been together. I go, well, I hope you don't get arrested.
I've been so deprived. Gosh,
it's fantastic. Sometimes I feel like I've heard it all. That's an excellent story.
Is that
the
not
risk
great?
of possibly getting arrested for something, that's
hitting the adrenaline at all levels.
Well, there was that book a few years ago about that couple that decided they were going to have it every day for a year, which then got them very comfortable with having sex again. Now, I have watched really I'm low 60s now, but since my mid 40s, listening to my friends talk about how seldom they had it. I mean, we started joking about having it once a quarter, but now I have friends who are in relationships and it's been years. What causes that? And then how do you get the thrill back so that you can keep doing it or start doing it?
Oh, what causes that? All kinds of things can cause that. There could have been painful sex. So if somebody's experiencing pain, kind of hard to experience pleasure when you're having sex with somebody that's experiencing pain. Nobody wants to be a part of that. There can be a lack of trust. There can be a lack of interest. There can be a lack of effort. There are all kinds of things. But we don't need sex. I mean, we need a roof over our head. We need food, and we need, companionship. But we don't. I think we don't treat it as something that we need. That's necessary. Children come along, so the opportunity to be spontaneous tends to be eroded. And then I think what ends up happening is it's not that people stop thinking about it, but they don't really know how to maneuver it, how to initiate. So we haven't done it for so long. This is going to be weird or awkward. Oh, I'm not going to bother. And maybe then they choose to masturbate, or maybe they choose to have an affair or something like that. But our brains, for the most part, are very vulnerable and naive when it comes to sex and talking about it, using the language. And, if it was hard to talk about sex at the beginning when it was interesting and fun, when it stops being that way, you don't have any practice doing it. And we get very sensitive about our own sexual self. So if someone talks to us about something they would like to try or something they would like to do differently, people tend to really become sensitive about that and feel like they're not good at it. And if you think you're not good at it, you're not going to try. Or one person's been initiating through the whole relationship, I'm not going to do that anymore. And maybe that was the lifeline of the relationship, is that one person was always doing it. The other person doesn't even know how to initiate and was raised to think that was another person's responsibility. So we could go on about that. But I believe, and that people can come back to it, and not even coming back immediately to being sexual as much as coming back to the physical touch and the emotional connection and the creating a bit of a simmer, creating some interest, and then moving back to where they feel safe enough or interested enough. I think if you're having sex more often, if you're having sex worth having and you're having it more often, it doesn't matter that on one day you don't have an orgasm. It doesn't matter that on one day it's not as interesting because you know you're going to come back and you're going to be doing it again, and it's different every time, and it doesn't feel so catastrophic. If it doesn't go well on your birthday and you're not going to get it again until next year, it doesn't feel like such a big deal.
Michelle, what are you thinking?
Well, so I think whenever you find yourself in the rut, what can you do about it? Like, what would be some tips you would tell a client?
I think that's that's a conversation you have to first have with yourself. Like, I feel like I'm in this rut. Okay. And what's going on with that? Why is it that I'm not thinking about sex, or I'm not initiating sex, or we're not having sex? So first look at yourself. I mean, I think we get so easily, we want to point a finger at somebody else when, unless you're just having sex with yourself, it's really something, something else that to pay attention to. And how are you feeling in your body? Do you find your own self desirable? Would you want to have sex with yourself? I mean, that's a crazy question, but would you want to have sex with yourself? Are you feeling healthy? Is there a lot of stress or worry or anxiety going on? What else is happening in your world that might be keeping you from wanting to experience this opportunity for physical pleasure and connection with your partner? How do you want to feel? Because again, it might be just something going on with one of you in the relationship, but start with yourself, have that conversation with the woman in the mirror, what's happening here. And then, check in with your partner in a way that doesn't feel critical or accusatory, or more like curious. Hey, have you noticed that it's been a while since we've done this? And are you thinking about it? Are you missing it? Would you like to do something about that? Is there something I could do that, and where you ask the question, is there something I could do that might make you feel like you're more interested in trying this or doing this? But check in with yourself first. I mean, I'm a big believer in be responsible for your own sexual self and not make it someone else's responsibility. Everyone's responsible for their own orgasm. It's no one else's job to give you an orgasm or to give you that pleasure. That's really something that is up to you to decide that you want that, and then to create that dialogue with your partner. And that can be the best place to have a conversation about sex is not the bedroom. The bedroom is a loaded place, right? It's a place where things might be going well or not going so well. So if we can get in the habit of having conversations when you're at dinner, when you're having a glass of wine or something, and there are lots of great, sexual resources out there. I know that Gottman, who is a renowned family therapist, has an app I think it's called Love Maps. And within it are different categories to learn more about your partner, and then questions, open-ended questions that you can ask. And then some are really spicy and some less so, but some ways to just bring the topic up and explore and be curious about what might be happening with them, and creating a space for you to discuss what might be going on with you. And again, that's that novelty thing. This has been great. I love this. But we're constantly evolving. Just because this is what your partner did in their 20s doesn't mean that they haven't started to think about some other things they might want to try later. We're constantly evolving in all areas of our life. So be okay with that. If your partner brings up something that's really out in left field, try not to attack them or be judgmental, because we're always thinking about new things. We're always seeing new things. And if you're open and curious, you're having ideas about other things. So be careful not to judge your partner, right? Doesn't mean that you have to do this thing, but be open to it and why they might want to explore that, and ask questions.
Do you notice, though, I think there are a lot of couples that don't have that kind of intimacy in their own communication, so that even having that kind of discussion would be difficult.
Absolutely. And I think that's where asking open-ended questions on topics that aren't just related to sex, but maybe are related to just, well, let's face it, we all respond to praise and appreciation, and we need it, and we don't get much of it. And so when you can begin a conversation, or you can have a ritual in your relationship where you're telling your partner things that you appreciate, specific things you appreciate that they're doing, and you begin to create this positive regard, then we feel a little safer to talk about an ask or a want or a need. We don't feel like we're going to be, we feel like we're already in a loving space. We built that rapport together. So I think, good communication should start with, I think there's like a ratio, 7 positives to 1 negative or something. Good luck with that. I'm not sure I could pull that off. But the idea is that this is great. I love this. Remember the time that we did that? It might be kind of fun if we tried this or that, or we explored. And because again, we're always changing. But I think we feel a little bit, again, this is the stigma. If there's something we want to explore, we're a little afraid that someone is going to feel that's very taboo or dirty, or there's something wrong with us for wanting that. No, it's just something you're curious about.
What about the woman who has kept quiet about what she really wanted for years, suddenly needing to say, I really want this, or you're doing that wrong? How do you bridge that chasm?
Well, I think the second thing you said is where we run into a bit of a trap. And that is, hey, you've been doing this thing. I haven't liked it since our first date. Oh my goodness. You've never told me that, So this is where I think it's important for women, because we're talking about women today, mostly, to be reading great. There's so many great things out right now in the field of sexology, especially for women. Finally, there's all kinds of great stuff for women. There's an amazing book by Emily Nagoski. I love this book. It's called Come As You Are. And she's a sex educator and a TED Talk, and has done a few TED Talks. And she's also on, there's a Netflix series by Goop, where they do a whole series on sex education. It's wonderful. But this book is just all about women learning more about yourself, why you feel the way you do, why at moments this is interesting and others this isn't, knowing your own anatomy, being okay with your own anatomy, being able to take a mirror and look at yourself and say, oh, that's what I look like. This is beautiful. That we're, it's all different and it's all beautiful. And understanding more about the things that turn you on and turn you off, sort of the brakes and accelerators when it comes to desire and arousal. And so I think for women, I think reading a great resource or watching something is a good place to start. Possibly it feels a little too threatening or vulnerable with your partner.
So, but really, like, what do you do if you're being honest? You've been doing it wrong for 20 years.
So what came to my mind, Fawn, on that one is the way I would give feedback to someone at work about something totally unrelated. And it would be
a performance audit.
It would be, what would make this even better if we tried this?
Sure.
Because it just
there
starts
are some things that wouldn't make better. That just suck.
But it just starts from a place where it's like, what would make this thing would make it better
if you didn't do that at all.
Even better. You spent more time doing this. No, yeah, make that even better. I'd like it even more.
Don't you think your partners want to stop doing something that they know you hate, that's turning you off? I would hope so. I would hope so.
So how do you say it though?
Well, again, I think you come with, I love you, and I'm so glad that we're together. And, there are some things that we do together that work really well, but there are some things I think that if we tried it in a different way, it could be really interesting for both of us, and how about this time when you're touching me, I'm going to put my hand over your hand and show you exactly where I want you to put that finger. Or, if possibly, you just let me kiss you the way I like to be kissed, we might both learn something new. And I think then again, you've got to be open. I've been doing the same thing for so long. I don't even ask you what you like. Is there anything you want to try differently? And then they get the opportunity. And we just go in striving to come from a place of really being positive and affirming. Because again, it's such a vulnerable topic.
Michelle and I were talking about how it changes also at different times. Like, got hormonally with pregnancy or perimenopause or menopause. So how does that impact our sex lives?
Well, it does. All of it does. And again, this is where we as women need to, instead of beating ourselves up for these changes in life, whether it's getting pregnant or it's perimenopause or menopause, I tell you what, I am going to make friends with menopause. I'm going to hack into whatever I need to do to survive menopause and still feel vibrant. Again, there's lots of good information out there now, and it could be definitely finding out about your hormones. What are your hormone levels? What's happening there? And you might choose to have some hormone replacement, which is fantastic. I've been doing the pellets for about 1.5 years, and it is a game changer. I feel amazing. My orgasms are stronger. My interest is there. I feel more energy. I feel renewed. I would not go back to just giving into what my body's doing as it's aging and just throw in the towel. And, so again, having really good conversations with your doctor about what's happening. I think people are even uncomfortable. I mean, the person we talk about the most challenging things with is typically our doctors, but we're not even comfortable talking to them. But that's the first place to reach out, because the deal is, if you're having some kind of sexual dysfunction, the first place you should go is your doctor. Go and find out if there's something going on with you physically or medically or hormonally, especially if there's pain. And then they might refer you to a pelvic floor physical therapist, or they might refer you to a clinical sex therapist. If we find out there's nothing wrong physiologically, then they might refer you to someone that can or give you a book or something that you can read that will just help you learn more about your own body and the changes. Definitely, if you're experiencing pain or discomfort, definitely go and see somebody. That it should not be happening. There are things that you can do depending on what you're experiencing that can help with that. Again, we've come a long way. Sometimes it's just as simple as lubrication that just helps your body, because these are the things that change as we get older, because definitely sex is going to be painful if you're not lubricating the way you used to, and very few of us are. And you don't have to have that discomfort. You don't have to have pain. Or if there is a condition like vaginismus or something, where you've got a muscular condition, there are definitely treatments. Pelvic floor physical therapists are amazing people at diagnosing and coming up with wonderful ways to help heal that part of the body.
What's the role of self-esteem with good sex?
What's the role of self-esteem in anything that we do? Really?
Well, there is that. Huh?
Yeah. So again, it's loving the body that you're in right now and deciding that you are valuable, worthy, and deserving of experiencing as much pleasure in this life as you possibly can. I have a belief that you can have it all. I really believe that you can have it all. Now, my all is not your all, and I'm not going to have it all at the same time. That doesn't work well for me. That creates burnout. But I believe you can have it all, but we have to really take a look at the woman in the mirror, and we have to decide that we're worth it. We have to realize we're on our own path. And no matter what titles and roles we have in this time on earth, that I came here for me. And I have to decide what I want my life to look like and how I want to feel, whether that's the people I surround myself with, how I continue to educate myself, how I treat my body, how physically healthy I am with the food that I eat, what I'm drinking. But it has to start with self-love. We can't expect anybody else to come in and fill us with that. It doesn't work. It won't land. We'll just, it's got to be a decision you make that you're going to love yourself and take care of yourself and that you're worth it. because we take care of so many other people. And
Michelle and I were texting each other about how much we've just really loved having you on the show today, because you're just fantastic. And, Michelle always gets the salient points at the end. So I'm curious about the wrap up today, girlfriend. What did you learn?
Oh, first of all, yes, it was fun. But thanks for making it just comfortable to talk about things that sometimes can be uncomfortable, especially on a podcast. But here are my big 4 takeaways. Number 1 was the best place to have sex talk is not in the bedroom, but you got to have the conversation. So make time for it. And then approach your partner with curiosity to just figure out how things are working. So it removes the judgment, be curious, have a conversation. And I think that led me into my 3rd point that you mentioned, and that was relationship rituals. So how do you make this a part of your regular routine where you get out of the house, you go and you talk about this stuff? We're already teaching each other in a relationship to talk about your finances, talk about how you're raising your kids, talk about sex. This is great stuff to go out on a date and do, rather than what you're probably doing, and that is going to a restaurant with everybody looking at their phones and not talking about anything. We've just talked about great topics to have, and how fun and flirty could that be too. And then finally, what I think was the most important point, and that is, if you want great sex, it starts with you. So thank you for an awesome conversation.
Mona, how do people get in touch with you? And do you do only in Florida? Are you able to do Zoom therapy elsewhere, or is your license restrictive?
My license is restricted. So I'm licensed in the state of Florida. So I see people in the state of Florida. And I'm in private practice. I have an office in Oldsmar. I see people in person and online. And so I can give you the links for all of that. I love this field. It gives me great pleasure to create a space where I hope my clients feel safe to come in and talk about some things that feel very scary, and they can just come out the door and feel that they're not broken, that they're just as normal as everybody else, and they have great possibility to experience pleasure, love, and connection in their lives, starting with themselves.
Well, it's a pleasure. Please come back on our show so we can have more fun. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining the Hard-Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Von Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.